From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us on this Memorial Day weekend. For Face the State, I'm Dennis House.
And I'm Susan Raff. If union leadership and union members vote yes, they will have a new contract, one that will save the state a good deal of money. But are these major concessions or in line with what many of us already pay? Jonathan Schulman is an insurance broker. We want to thank you for joining us here on Face the State and taking the trip from New York.
Susan, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
We've been hearing a lot about these concessions this week and about benefits and this tentative deal, which is not set in stone, but you've had a chance to look at it. And anytime you talk about changing benefits, that's scary for a lot of people. Are these some of the changes with co-pays and other things that we're already doing in the private sector?
Sure. So I think some of the changes that they're suggesting are fairly reasonable. For the most case. Some of them there may be a little bit of concern with. Starting with the health plan for the union members, the active union members, they're talking about raising the emergency room copay from $35 to $250. I think that's pretty reasonable. I think that it's something that will help rein in costs, and it will discourage people who don't necessarily need to use the emergency room, discourage them from going there and perhaps going to urgent care or primary care.
$35 seems awfully low so I would imagine that's not a discouragement to go to an ER if you only have to pay $35.
Absolutely. It's convenient. You can just walk in and go there. So I think that's a responsible, reasonable change that they're suggesting. I know they're also looking at raising the prescription copays a little bit from $5 to $10 for generics. I think that's also pretty reasonable. One of the changes they're suggesting may have a little bit more impact when it comes to the prescription drug coverage. They're talking about converting the plan to a formulary plan, which has more restrictions. It's a formulary list of approved drugs, whereas the current plan does not have that. And it also has some issues such as requiring prior authorization in step therapy, where you may have to try other medications before they approve one of the more expensive brand name drugs.
You know, there are a lot of voters out there who are not in unions who say, why can't the state run the state like a non-union place, like the private sector?
Absolutely.
Is it that simple?
Well, you know, you've got people in the union who have been accustomed to these super rich plans, and in some cases they started out their careers maybe not making as much as they would have in the private sector, partially in exchange for rich benefits. So I think people are going to be pretty surprised and a little disappointed.
I think the word that people have called it the Cadillac plan.
Absolutely.
Does any company offer benefits like the states do?
It's rare, but I know with my own firm, we handle quite a few private equity firms, hedge funds, companies that have the resources to pay top dollar for, as you mentioned, Cadillac plans. But the majority of companies just can't afford it. They want to offer great benefits, and they do everything they can to, but it's just not financially feasible.
You know, once we get past this, current negotiation system right now, period right now, what do you see for the future of insurance plans for unions 10, 20 years down the road?
Okay, well, as they're making small steps towards getting closer to the commercial private sector plans, I think this is probably a stepping stone where they begin to introduce slightly higher co-pays, a formulary on the drug plan. It's just the beginning of it, getting people used to change, whereas typically these union plans have been the same year after year after year. So I can totally see, especially with healthcare inflation and so forth, them having no other choice but to start adopting some of the things that are common in commercial private insurance plans.
There are some changes to Medicare. And as we know, Medicare is pretty widely used and accepted, and most people don't have a problem with that. But I understand with this contract, they're using something called Medicare Advantage, which may be good in some circumstances and in others not. Why not?
That's correct. So with the current program, they offer traditional Medicare, and then they provide supplemental coverage, which fills in the gaps that Medicare doesn't. Medicare Parts A and B cover 80% of in- and outpatient services, and the supplement fills in that 20% gap. By switching to a Medicare Advantage plan, you no longer have the widely accepted nationally accepted Medicare, but you're limited to an insurance carrier's network. So locally, if someone's doctors participate with the insurance carrier's network, it's not going to be a problem. However, if you have someone such as a snowbird who spends part of the year in Florida or another state, they may have issues getting access to care because they're limited to that local network. So while again, out of state, they may just have emergency room coverage, emergency care coverage. So that may cause an issue.
How strong is the union lobby at the Capitol?
Pretty strong, I imagine.
Do you think more and more states, as they face financial problems like Connecticut is, that they will, I mean, there are some term limits to this. I think it pushes it out for 10 years, which is controversial in itself.
Sure.
But they will look for more and more concessions because these benefits, the way they are not sustainable?
I think so. I think they'll have no other choice. Part of the problem with the Affordable Care Act is while it extended coverage to individuals, it did very little to address a real issue, which is the cost of health care. We have a very litigious society, and as such, doctors practice defensive medicine. They order tests that maybe aren't necessary just to cover themselves. And there are a whole host of other things that are contributing towards the cost of health care, which has been spiraling out of control. So I really do think that states are going to, as time goes on, have no other choice but to make some of these changes.
Thank you for joining us on Face the State. Where do you think this will go? Do you think that the unions sometimes with these benefits will have to take them because they see that could be worse?
I think so.
Okay.
Jonathan Schulman, thanks for being in the program today.
Pleasure.
Up next, we'll have a look at the ever-changing real estate market here in our state and what's next.
Plus, you can see segments from tonight's show in their entirety right on our website. Just visit WFSB.com and we'll be right back.